Hi, I'm Colette Watson, and this is Free Press Live, brought to you by Free Press, a nonprofit, nonpartisan media reform advocacy organization. Free Press Live is your weekly source for updates and live discussion of what's happening in the world of communications rights. Learn more about our work at freepress.net. On today's episode, Alicia Bell will join us to discuss how media reparations could be the key to finally making the upcoming Juneteenth holiday real. But first, we'll share a few updates. Welcome to Free Press Live. Thank you and welcome back to Free Press Live. In news updates, Lena Khan was sworn in this week as chair of the Federal Trade Commission. The news came on Tuesday, just hours after she was cleared by the Senate to be a commissioner of the agency. At age 32, Lena Khan becomes the youngest chair ever sworn in to the Federal Trade Commission. In a statement from Color of Change President Rashad Robinson, President Biden's nomination of Lena Khan to the Federal Trade Commission and his appointment of Tim Wu to the National Economic Council are important indicators that this administration is committed to antitrust reform. Color of Change has continuously advocated for Khan to be nominated to the FTC as a respected antitrust crusader whose aggressive vision for enforcing competition policy will greatly benefit Black voters, workers, and communities. As leading antitrust advocates and trusted allies in the movement for racial justice, Khan and Wu will open the door for long overdue regulation of big tech and other concentrated markets. And Free Press co-CEO Craig Aaron added, "This is an exciting and important time at the FTC and an opportunity to reshape and re-energize the agency. It's thrilling to see someone come out of the public interest community and take on this crucial role." In other reports, last week, to mark the one-year anniversary of Amazon's extended temporary moratorium on sales of its controversial recognition facial identification software to law enforcement agencies, over 20 advocacy groups and more than 10,000 supporters launched Protest Amazon on Thursday, June 10th, a digital demonstration part of the hashtag Eyes on Amazon Week of Action. Led by the digital rights group Fight for the Future, Protest Amazon is joined by Color of Change, Demand Progress, Free Press, Empower Change, Public Citizen, Presente, Roots Action, and other organizations demanding Amazon permanently divest from what campaign organizers call racist surveillance tech and police state surveillance. This campaign is also calling on the company to end its complicity in U.S. immigration and customs enforcement deportations. Follow the hashtag Eyes on Amazon to see what's happening and join the advocacy. Today, here on Free Press Live, we're discussing the holiday known as Juneteenth. And as we get ready to welcome our guests, I first want to say again, welcome to our viewers and ask you to chime in the comments to let us know where you're tuning in from and what Juneteenth means to you. So on June 19, 1865, history tells us that Union forces rode into Galveston, Texas, with the news that the Emancipation Proclamation had been issued 2 years earlier. They also brought the manpower to enforce it. This realization of freedom caused Black folks to immediately celebrate in the streets, walking from plantation to plantation, reclaiming stolen family members and loved ones, and to gather for family meals that day and each year afterward in commemoration of Juneteenth. In 2020, following the murder of George Floyd and the commencing of a global uprising for Black lives, many people began to raise the subject of the Juneteenth holiday to a new level of public awareness, pushing for state and federal holidays, corporate closures, and other recognitions. For many Black folks, the irony isn't lost. It's great that we're celebrating the end of slavery, but anti-Black state violence, such as that against George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, and so many others, that violence continues. So joining us today to discuss how we could finally achieve a society that's free from anti-Black state violence and thereby make Juneteenth real is my colleague, Alicia Bell, director of the Media 2070 Project. Welcome, Alicia.
Hi, Colette. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be here.
It's always an honor. And though I speak to you regularly every day, I must say it is always an honor. But, you know, as we approach Juneteenth, you and I are both from the Carolinas originally. As I told sort of the Juneteenth story, did that sound right to you? Does that resonate with things you've heard perhaps from your family or other community members?
It does. And really holding the fact that Juneteenth has been this sacred kind of community knowing for a very long time is something that really resonated, that it's something that folks have been talking about, celebrating, gathering around for years. And so it's, even though it's being federally recognized now, it's been a holiday for quite a while.
Quite a while. And I just want to reiterate for folks watching, if you have questions for Alicia or comments that you'd like to make as we get into the conversation, please jump into the comments here on Facebook or on YouTube, wherever you may be watching. But yeah, Alicia, you know, I remember even in elementary school, my great-grandfather, who lived to be 99 years old, talking about how the family used to put on their Sunday best, as he put it, to gather and join Juneteenth. And so it's always been rooted in community. Yep. And I think that very much the work that you do through Media 2070 and through, of course, News Voices has very much been about community too. I want to actually share with our viewers that this week, as part of the observance of Juneteenth, the Media 2070 Project is delivering petitions to over 5,000 newsrooms, petitions that were signed by activists within our advocacy at Media 2070, calling on those newsrooms to take a pledge. Tell us about that pledge, Alicia, and how how that vision of newsroom change is related to a vision of Black liberation.
Yeah. So, you know, I think that I want to come back to something you said earlier about the disconnect between the Juneteenth being recognized as a holiday in the world that we live in. The world where critical race theory is being targeted, where police violence is rampant, where all kinds of anti-Blackness is happening. And I've seen so much righteous critique and frustration with the honoring and the recognition of Juneteenth. And one of the things that sometimes feels missing from some of that conversation is the acknowledgement that when it comes to futures of Black liberation, when it comes to dismantling anti-Blackness, we are deep in the depths of a cultural battle. And this cultural battle is something that has been waged for decades, if not centuries. And that cultural front is one that where white supremacy has been winning. White supremacy has won holidays. White supremacy has won book publishing. It's won curriculum development. It's won newspapers. It's won journalism ethics. It's won so many of these spaces that contribute to culture creation. And we know that culture is just woven into every single thing we do, all of the policies that get passed, all of our material realities in our lives. And so when I think about that in relationship to this pledge, we are putting out a pledge calling for newsrooms to care for Black communities. And that shouldn't be radical or revolutionary, but we know that that's not always the case. And it's actually very rarely the case that newsrooms are actively and intentionally and specifically caring for Black communities. And so we're calling on newsrooms to do that with a few ways to kind of start that and move towards that process and move towards that work. And And it's something that's resonated with folks all across the world. We had that petition that you lifted up signed by people from Brazil to Australia to Canada and all across the United States. So folks know that anti-Blackness is a global issue. But if we don't build critical connection and critical mass to transform the culture, a culture that lends itself towards Black liberation, then we will never have the wins that we need to survive. We will never see an end to police violence. We will never see an end to Black mothers dying on hospital beds. We won't see an end to those things unless this culture shifts to one where we value and care for and hold all people. And that's what this work around media reparations and this pledge, as just a small part of it, is about.
Wow. And Alicia, I want to thank you for this work. You know, I've heard you say that the name of Media 2070 carries special meaning. And in particular, when you talk about the ongoing battle, if you will, of culture, I think that ties in to help us understand how the name of 2070 comes about, why we're looking at the year of 2070 in relation to the historical sort of winning that white supremacy has done when it relates to culture. But could you tell our viewers where that name Media 2070 comes from and what history it's building on?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we've done kind of excavating and reckoning with the history of media harm, one of the things that we found is that every 50 years or so, there is some sort of major racial reckoning and uprising that happens in the US. Oftentimes it's built and impacts global movements that are happening simultaneously. But one of the first places that we're looking at this when it comes to Media 2070 is in the 1920s, during the what they call the race riots of Chicago. We know that there were racial uprisings happening all across the U.S. And around that time, the Chicago Commission put out a report calling on trying to figure out what is it that's creating these racial reckonings, what's creating these uprisings, these riots. And they found that it in part was journalism, in part it was media. It was news media that was creating these conditions for the uprisings. Because of the ways that the media reported on and covered and told stories about Black lives. And so it made some recommendations. Some of the recommendations were like, don't use the N-word in your reporting, don't use racial slurs. And many of the recommendations weren't fulfilled. And then 50 years later, we see the same thing across racial reckoning, uprising, riot, erupting all across. And in 1967, what we see is the Kerner Commission putting out a report, or that the kind of like 67, 68, the Community Relations Committee and the Kerner Commission putting out this report that calls on the same thing. Says that media plays a role in upholding white supremacy. Community members see media as an actor when it comes to state violence. That media reflects this both in the narrative and the infrastructure, puts forth recommendations, and again, the recommendations are met some, but not for the most part. And here we are, 50 years later, with the same conversation, the same reckonings, the same riots, the same uprising, the same knowing and naming of the way that media, portrayal, narrative, infrastructure plays a role in it. And we're having the same conversation we've had for the past 100 years. And we can't. We can't stay on this hamster wheel. We can't stay in this pathway. And so Media 2070 is a way of getting off of that, honoring that in 2070, we shouldn't be having the same conversations and we shouldn't be having the same kind of reckonings that we had in 1970 or 1920 or any time earlier than that. It's a way of getting off of that hamster wheel.
You know, I've heard people say that our failure to address these conditions of anti-Black racism are the reasons why we don't have flying cars yet. and why we don't have some of the things, that we have dreamed or thought would be possible in a year 2000 or a year 2020. And I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but not really. I think, that what you're describing to me is a cycle that has pretty reliably shown up every 50 years of tension boiling over, but really being representative of the ongoing silencing or attempted silencing of Black voices and the ongoing subjugation and oppression of Black folks in this country based on race. And so I think when I'm listening to you talk about Media 2070, building on the work that happened in those times and the recommendations that were made but not met, I'm wondering what are some of the recommendations that Media 2070 has in this time? So, of course, when we talk about media for people, that can mean many, many things. It can mean entertainment in Hollywood, or it can mean social platforms that you're watching Free Press Live on right now every Wednesday at 2:30, or it can mean the news media that we turn to for information about what's happening in our communities and around the world. But I know that this pledge that we talked about that Media 2070 just put out focuses on news media and what newsrooms can do better. So what are the recommendations that Media 2070 is making, or rather calling on newsrooms to do better?
Yeah, so some of the things that we're calling on newsrooms to do are to stop the adultification of Black girls. Oftentimes, Black girls are held up and reported on as if they are full adults. There is no honoring of their childhood and their youth. So we're calling on newsrooms not to do that. We're calling on newsrooms to be skeptical of police narratives about Black people and Black lives. There's been so much research and data that shows, one, that police departments are infiltrated and have been infiltrated by white supremacists for a very long time. We know that there's a history of policing that dates back to slavery, and we know that police lie. That's something that's been documented in abundance. And so we're asking newsrooms to be skeptical in response to that knowledge. And then also to trust and support and care for Black journalists. We want newsrooms to be trusting Black journalists to report in a nuanced way on Black stories and stories that disproportionately impact Black lives. And we want newsrooms that are going to provide space for rest and for care and for grieving when there is a constant barrage of anti-Blackness in the world that is just very, very visible and very impactful to people's lives. Something that we've seen in kind of rapid succession in a visible way over the past year, but something that's been going on for quite a while. So we're calling on newsrooms to do better. We're calling on them to examine their structures, their who is their staff, who is their leadership, to figure out and assess whether it reflects the communities that they want to serve and the communities that they proclaim to be a part of. And we're asking them to make the commitment to do that and to be committed to getting closer and closer. We're not making an ask for perfection. We're not making an ask for newsrooms to automatically be oriented against racism, to be anti-racist institutions, though we certainly know that has to happen. But that's not even what we're calling for in the pledge. We're calling for them to care for Black communities and to take a few steps to begin visibilizing that care. And so that's just a subset of what we know is possible. We know there's so much more newsroom policy, program, infrastructure that needs to shift. But right now, in that moment, that's something that we're calling for. And it also partners well with some metric creation, some evaluation creation that was just recently released from Sierra Hinton at Scalawag Magazine and Lizzie Hazeltine from the North Carolina Local News Fund. They created a list of and a pathway towards becoming an anti-racist newsroom. And so when I think about this pledge for caring for Black communities, I see it a lot in alignment and weaving in this lineage towards newsrooms being anti-racist newsrooms. And by anti-racist, I want to be very clear that I mean newsrooms that care for, support, and support all people in the community. I think without a commitment to anti-racism, without a commitment to caring for Black communities, our newsrooms just aren't aren't reporting on whole communities and aren't serving whole communities the way that they're supposed to.
Thank you, Alicia. I want to ask you about the petition delivery that's happening tomorrow, actually Friday, I believe. Tell us a little bit more about how the pledge is now going to be making its way into newsrooms and what your hopes are for that.
Yeah, so at the same time we released this pledge, we released the petition for folks to sign on to, calling for their local, regional, or national newsrooms to dismantle anti-Blackness and care for Black communities. And so that delivery is going to happen on Friday, that petition delivery. And we are going to be kind of promoting that with other media creation and asking allies and partners and community members who signed that petition to amplify and uplift it as well. But that petition is going to 5,000 different newsrooms. Those newsrooms represent the zip codes where people are, the regions they're a part of, the national newsrooms that cover them wherever they are. And so after that, we will continue and kind of re-up this push for newsrooms to sign on to the pledge. For more newsrooms to sign on to care for Black communities. But that re-up, that re-push starts with this petition delivery. So this is not an end. It is a declaration that thousands of people across the world need news to dismantle anti-Blackness. It is a declaration in a longer pathway to get us towards, ideally, we want all the newsrooms to commit to caring for Black communities. We want all the newsrooms to be anti-racist. But until we get there, we're going to keep pushing forward.
Until we get there, indeed. And I want to congratulate you, Alicia, because I'm taking a look at the link that was placed into the comments here by our tech director, the amazing Vanessa Maria Graber, and also our digital team. But I'm looking at the link at media-2070.medium.com, where the pledge is not only linked, but a list of the newsrooms that have signed on is available for folks to check out. So I definitely want to congratulate you. You have Scalawag Magazine signed on to this pledge to care for Black communities. There's over 32 newsrooms here, and I'll just say a few of them: Raleigh Convergence, WWJ Radio, WFAE, WREG, which I believe is a Memphis television station, Puerto Rico Sun Communications, 100 Days in Appalachia, the Tucson Sentinel, Trenton Journal, Chicago Reporter. I mean, the list goes on and on. Press On, Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at City University of New York, better known as CUNY. So many newsrooms representing so many places are listed here. And when I see the geographical distribution, it makes me feel like there is truly a broad vision that is coming together bit by bit, brick by brick, of what the media of the future world we want could look like. So to that end, as I do congratulate you and the team, Alicia, and as we move to wrap here, I want to ask folks in the comments, first of all, to chime in and let us know if there are local newsrooms that you think do a good job, or newsrooms that you think should do a better job. But talk to us about what the media landscape is like in your community, particularly coverage of Black communities and communities of color where you are. Let us know where you're viewing from. But as we get ready to close, Alicia, I want to ask you, what is the vision? As we invite newsrooms to sign on to this pledge, even beyond that, what is your dream for the future? A lot of people like to wear that T-shirt that says, "I am my ancestors' wildest dreams." I like to think that, on June 19th, 1865, that our folks were dancing and celebrating a new world there in the streets of Texas and beyond. What is the world that we'll be dancing and singing about when media reparations are won?
So many things come to mind with that. When you were talking about dreams and visions and flying cars earlier, one of the things that made me think is that we've created a future where Black dreams are fulfilled in abundance. And we've been able to facilitate that because we've shifted the culture, the media across all platforms, digital, analog, entertainment, news, all of those places. We've shifted the media and the contribution to culture that makes it so that Black dreams are difficult, that Black dreams are difficult to fulfill, are difficult to make real. So I envision a world where that's not the case, and where dreams and visions for what's possible exist in a regenerative climate, a regenerative economy, regenerative practices of how we connect with each other and build relationship. And so much of getting there, getting to that lived reality, is about the media we create and the media we transform in the culture. So I envision a forest floor of media where it is oriented towards regeneration, towards repair, towards healing, towards an abundance of vision and dream, and everything is reflected in that.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for sharing that vision and all of your efforts around making media more truthful. I think that our call, honestly, is for media to simply accurately reflect the truth of Black lives and all our lives, and to no longer perpetuate a myth of Black inferiority. So truly, it's a pleasure to have you here on Free Press Live today. And I want to encourage folks to join us every Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on Facebook and on YouTube for Free Press Live, your best source for news and updates at the intersection of media, technology, and human rights. My name is Colette Watson, and we'll see you next week, 2:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on Free Press Live. Thank you, and have a great evening.